record keeping requirements. So with record keeping, I like to say use the 3s and 6s almost for everything, but we're going to go over it. So driver's logs, 6 months. You have to keep those for 6 months. Driver vehicle inspection reports, 90 days. So 3 months for those. Your federal annual inspections, 14 months, although I say keep them for 3 years, but for audit purposes, for investigation purposes, yes, you only have to have the current year and the last year's in there. Maintenance records, it says for 1 year, but if you look in the I have a little symbol next to that, because yes, it says you only have to keep maintenance records for 14 months. But there's other areas in the regulation book that say you have to keep these records for 3 years after the vehicle leaves your control. And it depends on if it was big stuff, if you replaced a motor, if you did this, if you replaced transmission, things like that. To me, I just don't want my mechanics or anybody else in the offices to have to remember what's 14 months, what's 3 years, what's 6 months, so I keep everything kind of simple. 3s and 6s. So with maintenance records, I just say 3 years. Keep everything for 3 years after that vehicle leaves your control, whether it be sold, salvaged, de-leased, whatever. After 3 years, then you can purge those documents. Roadside inspections, like I said, you have to have a folder that is just your roadside inspections with a copy of all those inspections in there for the last 12 months. Positive drug and alcohol tests you have to keep for 5 years. So yes, you only have to keep your drug and alcohol testing records and results for a year for drivers, actually. Even the pre-employment test, you only have to keep for 12 months. But if anybody tested positive, whether it be a pre-employment test or a random test, it doesn't matter. You have to keep those records for 5 years. So make sure that if you have had any positive results, then you're keeping those for 5 years. Any refusal, same thing. Refusal's the same as a positive, so 5 years for that. Negative drug and alcohol tests is 12 months. Like I said, even pre-employment tests, a lot of companies think that they have to keep those drug and alcohol testing records indefinitely for at least the pre-employment one, and you don't. It's honestly, you only have to keep any drug and alcohol test results if they're negative for 12 months. Me, I prefer to actually keep them indefinitely until 3 years after the employee leaves our control. If they have not had any positive drug test results and you can show consistency and everything matches and you're doing everything you're supposed to do, if there ever does come litigation, you can show, for one, that driver was drug tested however many times over the last 10 years, because that's typically what they go back whenever they do litigation, is 10 years. And you can say, look, this driver's been tested repeatedly over and over and over again. He's never had any issues. So if there ever is a case where, there is a crash, you can show consistency. You can show, no, we have this stuff. I always say, if something doesn't hurt you, then why is it not a bad thing to just keep it until 3 years after that driver leaves your control? And then at that point, because driver qualification files you have to keep for 3 years. Most of that other stuff you have to keep for 3 years. So why wouldn't you just keep the drug and alcohol testing information with it after they leave your control? And I'm not saying they have to be kept for 3 years. They have to be kept for 3 years after they are gone, not 3 years, and then you can get rid of it. Driver qualification files have to be kept for 3 years after the driver leaves your employment. So medical cards, 3 years, same thing. You have to show 3 years of medical card history. So let's talk about the safety ratings. So safety ratings, there is satisfactory, conditional, unsatisfactory, and then there's not rated. A satisfactory rating basically means that you're okay. You're good, you're adequate. They're never going to get, I want like 5 stars and fireworks going on whenever you get a satisfactory rating, right? But that's not what they do. They just say you're adequate. So that's the highest you can get. Conditional rating means that adequate controls are not really in place. Violations could potentially result. In most cases, they do, sometimes more than others. And then unsatisfactory, you're not adequate at all. There's issues, and there's big issues, enough for them to say either you fix this or you're shut down. And then there's non-rated reviews. A lot of times when I see non-rated, it's because a company, they're actually a good company. They're doing the proper things, they're operating properly, but maybe the paperwork side is just, they did a couple things that messed it up maybe totally out of their control, but the numbers are what they are, so they got a non-rated status. I've seen that happen. I've also seen it where whenever you go to apply for a corrective upgrade or corrective action review, you submit those corrective actions, and instead of upgrading you from a conditional to a satisfactory, they might upgrade you from a conditional to a not rated status, or from an unsatisfactory to a conditional status. Sometimes they'll just put you as not rated. With facilities, whenever they're doing specific locations, they'll also do a not rated status if they're only doing one location. So say you have 15 locations all over the US and they're only coming to audit this one particular location. A lot of times they'll give you a not rated status whenever they do those. And also focused reviews. Whenever they do focused reviews, they're going to give you a non-rated status because they only did that focused review. They can't give you a full satisfactory rating because they didn't look at everything. They didn't look at all the factors. They maybe only looked at hours of service. So they can't really give you a satisfactory rating when they didn't look at all those factors. So sometimes they'll give you a not rated review for that.